The wind moved slowly across the dry fields. It carried the sound of grass brushing against the old fence. The ranch was quiet, too quiet for most people, but not for Daniel Cross. He liked the silence, he liked the empty land, and he liked the distance from the galaxy that once demanded his blood. Daniel was a retired soldier. He had fought in wars that lasted years, battles that broke armies, and campaigns that left whole worlds burning. But he walked away. He built his home on Earth's empty plains, far from cities, far from noise, far from anything that reminded him of war. Now his days were simple. He woke with the sun, fixed fences, cared for the animals, and at night he sat on the porch, watching stars that he refused to name. People in nearby towns called him the Ghost Rancher. Some said he was a hero, some said a killer, some said he was both. Daniel never cared. He just wanted peace. But peace is fragile, and sometimes the galaxy does not leave old soldiers alone. It began on a stormy night. Rain hammered the land. Thunder shook the ranch, and Daniel sat inside, listening to the storm. Then he heard it, a knock, soft but desperate, against his wooden door. Daniel froze. Nobody came here, not in weather like this, not in the middle of nowhere. He grabbed the old lantern, opened the door, and saw them. 11 figures stood in the rain, cloaked and trembling. Their shapes were wrong, not human. Their eyes glowed faintly in the stormlight. Daniel knew at once. Aliens, not soldiers, not hunters, but something else. Their clothes were torn, their faces tired, and their voices shook as they spoke. "Please." "Shelter," the tallest one said, her voice heavy with an accent Daniel did not know. "We have nowhere else to go." Daniel narrowed his eyes. His hand was still near the lantern, but his other hand almost reached for the old rifle by the door. He did not move. Instead, he studied them. 11 women, each different in skin, shape, and markings, but all shared the same look. Loss, grief, and fear. He said nothing, but one of them stepped forward, her skin pale blue, her eyes shining, silver even through the rain. "We are widows," she said, "our husbands, gone in the wars." Another spoke, voice sharp like broken glass. "They hunt us, they burn us, we ran, and now we beg you. Human, let us stay, just for tonight." Daniel's chest tightened. War, always war, even here on his quiet ranch. It followed him. He should have closed the door, told them to move on, told them to find help elsewhere, but he did not. Instead he asked, "Why here? Why me?" The first widow lowered her head. "Because you are Daniel Cross, the last commander who never lost, the one who walked away, the one the galaxy fears." Her words cut through him like the storm wind. He had tried so hard to vanish, to bury his name, but it seemed the galaxy had not forgotten. And now, 11 alien widows stood at his door, asking for a place to hide. Daniel let the silence grow heavy. Rain poured down the roof. Thunder rolled again. And still he did not answer. His mind screamed to refuse, to protect his peace. But then he saw the youngest widow stumble, fall to her knees, blood mixing with mud under the storm. He saw fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for the others. Daniel cursed under his breath. He hated that part of himself, the part that still cared, the part that could never walk away from people who had nowhere else to go. With a slow hand, he opened the door wider. "Inside," he said, voice hard. "Before I change my mind." The widows entered, dripping rain onto the wooden floor. They looked around his ranch house with wary eyes, as if expecting him to betray them. But Daniel only shut the door and set the lantern back down. He stood, with arms crossed, watching them carefully. "You get one night," he said firmly. "After that, you move on." The widows nodded, some with relief, some with suspicion. They gathered near the fire he lit. Warming themselves in silence, Daniel sat apart, his mind uneasy. Why here? Why now? Why him? Questions twisted inside his head. But deep down, a darker thought burned. If the widows found him, then maybe others could too. And if that was true? The storm outside was not the only danger moving toward his ranch. The ranch was not built for guests. Daniel had lived alone for years, and every chair, every plate, every corner of the house spoke of solitude. Now 11 strangers sat inside, silent but restless, their eyes shifting in the glow of the fire. The storm outside beat against the windows, but it was the silence inside that carried the real weight. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching them carefully. He had seen many faces in war, but the faces before him carried a strange mixture of strength and weakness. Each widow looked different, tall and scaled, short and furred, pale as bone, or marked with strange glowing lines, but the grief was the same in all their eyes. They were women who had lost everything, and yet, Daniel thought, grief alone could not have driven them across the galaxy to his door. Finally, the silver-eyed widow, the one who had first spoken, raised her head. "You want answers, human," she said softly, her voice steady but tired. "We will give them." Daniel's jaw tightened. He did not nod, did not speak, but his silence told them to continue. The widow glanced at the others, and then she began. "Our husbands were warriors, commanders, leaders of different worlds," she explained. "They fought in the great wars, the same wars you fought, the wars that scarred every star. One by one they fell. Not to enemies, but to betrayal." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Betrayal," he repeated, his voice low. "Yes." Another widow answered, her skin dark as stone, her voice sharp with anger. They were promised protection, safe passage, truce, agreements. All lies. They were led into traps, their armies broken, and we, their wives, were marked as burdens. The victors did not want survivors. They wanted silence. Daniel felt something heavy stir in his chest. He had seen betrayal before, seen soldiers sold out by greedy politicians, seen worlds traded like coins. But the way these women spoke, it was not only loss, it was pursuit. They were not refugees by chance. They were being hunted. Another widow leaned closer to the fire, her voice trembling as she spoke. "There is more. Our husbands left us something, knowledge, secrets, the kind of secrets that can break empires." The room seemed to grow colder despite the fire. Daniel said nothing, but inside his mind raced secrets, empires, betrayal. It was the same poison that had filled the galaxy for decades. And now, somehow, it had been carried to his quiet ranch. The silver-eyed widow looked straight at him. "They hunt us not because we are widows, but because we carry truth. And truth must not be spoken." Daniel pushed away from the wall, his boots heavy on the floorboards. "I don't care about your truths," he said, his voice sharp. "I gave up war. I gave up sides. I built this ranch to be forgotten. If you brought hunters here, then you've signed your own death, and maybe mine too." The youngest widow flinched at his words. She whispered, "He had nowhere else to go. You are the last commander the galaxy fears. If anyone can keep us alive, it is you." Daniel's hands curled into fists. He hated it, hated the way they looked at him, as if he was their salvation. He had not asked for this. He had not wanted this. But the memory of the wounded widow collapsing in the mud still burned in his mind. He turned away, staring out the window at the storm. His voice came out low, almost bitter. "You think I can save you, but you don't know the truth. I am tired. I am done. I am not the man the galaxy remembers." But even as he said it, his instincts screamed. He had felt it before, the strange stillness in the air, the warning before danger. His eyes narrowed, scanning the storm outside. In the flashes of lightning, he thought he saw something move across the fields. Shadows, too many shadows for one night. He walked back to the table, staring at the widows. You said they hunt you, he said slowly. Are they hunting you now? Silence. Then the dark-skinned widow lowered her head. Yes, she whispered. They never stop. We ran, but they always find us. Even now, they are coming. Daniel's jaw clenched. He wanted to curse. Wanted to throw them out and lock the door. But instead, he grabbed the old lantern, lit it brighter, and looked each widow in the eyes. You brought death to my door, he said coldly. And if they step on my land, then I'll show them what happens when you wake a ghost. The widows watched him in silence, their eyes wide, some with fear, some with hope. But before anyone could speak, the storm outside cracked with a sound that was not thunder. It was sharper, heavier, the sound of a ship breaking through the clouds. Daniel's heart hardened. He had been right. The hunters had come, and they had found his ranch. The sound rolled across the land. It was not thunder, not the voice of the storm. It was heavier, colder, something that carried purpose. Daniel knew it at once. A ship, breaking through the clouds, searching, hunting. The widows stirred in panic, their cloaks shifting as they rose from their seats. Some whispered prayers in languages Daniel did not know. Others clenched their fists, trembling as if every sound of the sky brought back old nightmares. But Daniel did not panic. He stood at the window, eyes sharp, his jaw set. He had heard that sound before, on countless battlefields. It was the sound of war finding him again. Stay away from the windows, Daniel said, his voice firm. The widows obeyed, pulling back into the shadows of the room. Daniel blew out the lantern, leaving the ranch house in near darkness. Only the faint glow of the fire lit their faces. He moved quickly, his boots heavy on the wooden floor as he crossed to the old trunk in the corner. A trunk he swore he would never open again. The lock clicked, the lid creaked. Inside lay pieces of his past, the old rifle, the knives, the faded insignia of his rank. Daniel's hands hovered for a moment. Almost trembling, he had buried this life, buried it deep, but the hunters outside would not let it stay buried. With a slow breath, he lifted the rifle. Its weight was the same as he remembered. Heavy, unyielding. A reminder of who he once was. One of the widows, the silver-eyed leader, stepped forward. You said you were done with war, she whispered. Daniel did not look at her. I was, he said quietly, but war has a way of finding me. The storm outside cracked again. This time the light of engines flashed through the clouds. Daniel pulled the window shutters closed, sealing the house in shadow. They'll search the fields first, he said, his voice sharp. They'll look for heat, movement, tracks in the mud. How do you know? Asked the youngest widow, her voice trembling. Daniel turned his eyes on her. Because I've been on their side before. I know how hunters think. I know how killers move. The room fell silent. The widows stared at him, and for the first time they saw not just a tired rancher, but the ghost of a commander who had survived every war. Daniel's face was carved in stone, his eyes cold. The man who wanted peace was gone. The soldier had returned. He moved through the house. Fast and quiet, he checked the locks, barred the doors, and placed knives in easy reach. Then he looked back at the widows. You do not move until I tell you. If they enter this ranch, they will not leave. The widows huddled close, their fear thick in the air. Outside, the storm began to change. The rain slowed, the wind shifted, and the sound of footsteps moved across the fields. Not one set, but many. Shadows walked between the flashes of lightning, tall and sharp, carrying weapons that gleamed in the storm. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. He opened the door just a crack, peering into the night. There, moving through his fields, he saw them. Alien soldiers, armored and masked. They moved like predators, scanning with glowing devices, their voices hissing through the rain. They were not looking for survivors. They were looking for the widows. Daniel shut the door silently, his face colder than the night air. "They're here," he said. "They know you're inside." One of the widows gasped. Another whispered, "We should run." Daniel's eyes snapped toward her. "Run where? Into the storm? Into their arms?" "This is my land, and they stepped on it. Running is over." He moved back to the table, spread a rough map of the ranch with his knife. Quickly, he marked the barns, the sheds, the fences. "I know this land," he said. "Every inch, every shadow. They think it's just a ranch, but tonight it's a trap." The widows watched in silence, their fear shifting into something else. They saw the ghost of a commander giving orders. His calm voice cut through their panic. "This storm hides us as much as it hides them. If they come, we bleed them here." Quiet, sharp, and fast. The youngest widow whispered, "You sound like a general again." Daniel glanced at her, his face unreadable. "No," he said. "I sound like a man who wants to keep his land, and if I must kill to do it, then I will." Outside, the hunters drew closer. Their voices hissed through the storm. Their devices flickered with strange light. Daniel's heart was steady, his rifle heavy in his hands. He moved toward the door, each step slow, precise, silent. Then he paused, glancing back at the widows one last time. "Remember this," he said. "If I fall, you fight, because mercy is not in their blood." The fire crackled, the storm roared, and the shadows moved closer to the ranch. The first hunter stepped onto the porch. His boots echoing on the wood, Daniel raised his rifle, his breath slow, his eyes locked. The door creaked open under the hunter's hand, and in the dark silence at the ranch house, Daniel Cross whispered, "Welcome to my land." The hunter's hand pushed the door open. Rain dripped from his armor. His weapon glowed faintly in the stormlight. His masked eyes scanned the shadows of the ranch house, searching, waiting. Behind him, more boots struck the porch, the slow rhythm of a pack of predators. The widows huddled near the fire, frozen. In silence, their breath shallow, Daniel stood alone near the door. Rifle steady, shoulders squared, eyes unblinking. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the storm pressing against the walls and the hiss of the hunter's breathing. Then Daniel spoke, his voice low, calm, almost cold. "You should have stayed off my land." The rifle cracked. The flash lit the room. The first hunter dropped without a sound, his armored body hitting the wooden porch. Chaos erupted. Voices hissed in the alien tongue, weapons lifted. The porch shook with sudden weight. Daniel moved with speed that did not belong to a tired rancher. He stepped sideways, fired again, ducked, reloaded in one smooth motion. Each shot was placed, each movement clean, precise, practiced. He was not a farmer now. He was the soldier the galaxy had once feared. The widows gasped in shock. They had heard stories of human soldiers, of their speed, of their ruthlessness, but to see it was different. Daniel moved like a shadow wrapped in steel. The hunters tried to force the door. 2 fell before they crossed the threshold. Another rolled inside, weapon raised. But Daniel's knife met him first, fast and silent. The firelight danced against blood, against steel. The widows held their breath as Daniel fought. For years he had hidden this part of himself, but now it returned without hesitation. Every step, every strike, every shot was the memory of old wars carried in his bones. But Daniel was only one man. For every hunter that fell, another stepped from the storm. Their numbers grew, their hissing voices circling the ranch. The walls shook. With heavy blows, the roof groaned under weight. They were not retreating, they were testing. Hunters always tested before they killed. Daniel pulled the door shut and barred it with heavy wood. He turned to the widows, his voice sharp. "They will come harder now. This is no raid. This is a hunt, and we are the prey." The silver-eyed widow stepped forward, her voice strong despite the fear in her eyes. "Then you cannot fight alone?" "We will help." Daniel glared at her. "You don't know what help means in a fight. Help means Blood, it means death. It means standing in the fire until nothing is left. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. They were trapped. The ranch was surrounded. The storm hid the hunters well, and the widows had nowhere to run. If they stayed silent and weak, they would all die. If they fought, at least they had a chance. Daniel moved quickly, dragging old tools from the walls, handing knives, axes, and iron rods to the widows. "Fine," he said, his voice hard. "You want to live, then fight like it. Stay low, strike fast. Don't hesitate. Hesitation is death." The widows gripped the weapons with trembling hands. Some whispered prayers, others clenched their teeth. For years they had been victims, widows with nothing left. But Daniel's voice struck something. Inside them, not hope, but survival. The fire in their eyes flickered, small but dangerous. Outside, the storm shifted again. Strange lights flickered across the fields, green beams scanning the land. The hunters moved in silence now, no longer testing, no longer waiting. They were closing in for the kill. Daniel blew out the fire, plunging the ranch house into near darkness. Only the glow of lightning through the cracks lit their faces. He whispered, "Quiet now. They are coming." The first window shattered. A hunter leapt inside, weapon ready, but Daniel was faster. His rifle roared. The intruder fell. Another crashed through the side wall, but the stone-skinned widow struck first, swinging her iron rod with all her strength. The sound of cracking bone echoed in the dark. Her breath came fast, wild, but she did not stop. For the first time since her husband's death, she fought. The ranch became a storm of its own. Hunters broke through doors, smashed through windows. Steel met steel, screams and gunfire blended with thunder. Daniel moved like a ghost in the chaos. He struck from shadows, his blade flashing, his rifle roaring. The widows followed his lead, their fear melting into raw survival. Some fought with fury, some with desperation, but all fought. Yet the hunters did not tire. For every one that fell, more came. Daniel felt the weight pressing, the odds stacking higher. His breath grew heavy, his arms ached, but his eyes never wavered. He fought not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. This was his land, and no one would take it. Then came the silence. For a heartbeat, the hunters pulled back. Retreating into the storm, the widows gasped for air. Clutching their makeshift weapons, Daniel stood in the center, his rifle smoking, his chest rising and falling. "They're not done," he said quietly. "They're regrouping. The real attack comes next." The widows looked at him in shock. "If that wasn't the real attack," the youngest whispered, "then what is?" Daniel stared toward the storm, his jaw set, his voice steady but grim. "Their commander is here, and when he steps on this ranch, you will understand why they wanted me dead too." Outside, the wind shifted again, and in the distance, through the roar of thunder, a deeper sound rose. Heavy engines, heavier than before. A massive shadow moved in the sky, blotting out the stormlight. The hunters were no longer alone. Their warship had arrived above Daniel's land. The wind over the ranch carried a strange silence, one that made even the cattle restless. John sat on his porch, the shotgun laid across his knees, the weight of it heavy but comforting. The alien widows were inside the barn, whispering, keeping close together as if they knew something terrible was coming. For days, shadows had been circling the ranch, moving just beyond the fences. Sometimes John thought he saw shapes tall, thin, and glimmering in the moonlight. Other times he only heard the faint hum, like metal grinding against stone. The widows avoided his eyes whenever he asked, "What are those things?" Their silence told him enough. They knew, but they were not ready to say. One night, as he sipped his black coffee, one of the widows finally spoke. Her name was Sarah, her voice sharp yet broken. "They are oath keepers," she said, trembling. John frowned. "Oath keepers? What kind of name is that?" She explained, slowly, that their kind had sworn an ancient oath to never betray their people. If any widow fled their old world, the oath keepers would come. They would hunt, they would punish, and they would make an example. John leaned back, the wood of the chair creaking. "So you brought your hunters here," he said. His voice calm, but his heart burning. The other widows fell silent, until another, older one stepped forward. "We begged for your shelter, because no place else is safe," she whispered. John's jaw tightened. His ranch had been quiet for years, and now it was about to become a battlefield. He stood, his voice low and steady. "If they're coming here, then we fight here." But Sarah shook her head. "You don't understand, human. Oath keepers cannot be killed. They cannot bleed. They only enforce." The words chilled him. If they couldn't be killed, what chance did one retired man have? Yet John had lived his life with a simple rule. No one comes onto his land and threatens it. Not man, not beast, not alien. And the sight of the widows trembling like cornered deer lit something deep inside him. He walked into the barn, unlocked the old trunk at the back. Inside was not just a shotgun, but relics of his past medals, a combat knife, and an old communicator with the symbol of Earth's defense forces. The widows gasped when they saw the medals, their eyes wide. "You were a soldier?" one whispered. John simply nodded. "Long time ago." The widows fell silent again, but their eyes held new weight. Maybe, just maybe, this broken man could stand where no one else had. But the oath keepers were drawing closer. He could hear the hum every night now. Closer, louder, surrounding the... Next evening, the widows performed a ritual in the barn. They lit blue flames that burned without smoke, and chanted words that twisted the air. John stood at the door, uneasy. "What are you doing?" Sarah's face was pale. "We are breaking." "The oath," John frowned. "Didn't you say it cannot be broken?" She nodded, her voice shaking. "That is why they will not stop until they kill us. And anyone who protects us." John's hand tightened around the shotgun. So this was the truth. The widows had carried their curse to his ranch, by sheltering them. He had become part of it. The wind outside howled, carrying with it the first sound of boots, or something like boots, stepping across dry earth. Dozens of them, maybe more. The widows clung to each other. Whispering prayers, John stepped outside, the barn door creaking behind him. In the distance, he saw them at last, figures tall as the barns, cloaked in black light, their faces hidden behind masks of glowing silver. They did not walk. They glided like shadows made flesh, and their voices, one single voice shared between many, thundered across the ranch. "The oath is broken. The debt will be paid." John spit into the dirt, raised his gun, and muttered to himself, "Not on my land." The quiet nights of the ranch were gone. For months, John's land had become a place of whispers, drills, and secret plans. The alien widows were no longer just refugees. They had become something more: warriors, spies, and survivors, with heavy burdens in their hearts. But now, the war they had tried to escape was coming back. It started with the sky. John noticed it one evening while repairing the old fence. The stars above seemed to shift, blotting out one another. A strange hum rolled through the air, low and heavy, like thunder trapped inside the clouds. The widows froze where they stood. Their faces turned pale, their sharp ears twitching. "They've found us," whispered Alira, her voice breaking. John's stomach tightened. He didn't need her to explain. He had seen war before. He recognized the sound of warships moving through the atmosphere. That night, the widows gathered inside the barn, the only place large enough for all of them. Their silver eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light, and their voices were filled with fear and anger. They swore they would never come this far, one widow said bitterly. "They swore to leave us in peace," another added, shaking her head. "They swore an oath," Illyra said, her voice trembling. and now it is broken. John leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He said nothing. He listened out finally. They turned to him. "You don't understand," Illyra said, her gaze sharp on John. "This is not just an army. These are the same warlords who killed our husbands. They left us with nothing. They will not stop until they destroy all who resist." John felt the old weight pressing down on him, the same feeling he had when his squad in the war looked at him for orders. He had sworn never to lead again, never to fight again. But now, these women, these survivors, were staring at him like he was the last wall between them and death. "I understand enough," John finally said, his voice low. "If they want a war, they'll find one here." The barn fell silent. The widows stared at him in shock, and for the first time since they arrived, something new glimmered in their eyes' hope. The next morning, the war truly began. Ships the size of mountains hovered above the horizon, casting shadows that stretched for miles. The ground trembled as smaller scout ships descended near the ranch. Black armored soldiers poured out, their weapons glowing with cruel fire. John stood at the edge of his land, shotgun slung across his back, and the widows lined up beside him. They looked like a mismatched army farmers turned fighters, warriors with broken hearts, and one tired human who only wanted peace. But there was fire in their eyes. The first wave of soldiers charged. Energy blasts lit up the fields. John dove, behind a stone wall, firing with precise aim. 2 soldiers dropped instantly. The widows moved with surprising speed, their strange alien weapons singing through the air, cutting down enemies with glowing arcs. The ranch became a battlefield. Cattle scattered. Fences burned. The ground shook as explosions tore into the soil. Yet the widows fought like they had nothing left to lose. And John fought like he had everything to protect. Hours passed. Bodies littered the fields. Smoke rose into the evening sky. But the battle was not over. As night fell, the main warship descended lower. Its lights were like burning suns, bathing the land in blinding white. A voice echoed through the air, booming from speakers so loud the barn. Doors rattled. "Return what is ours," the voice demanded. "Or burn with the traitors you protect." The widows froze. John glanced at them, realizing something they had never told him. "What do they mean?" he asked. Illyra's face turned pale. She hesitated, then stepped forward. "They don't want us," she said softly. "They want what we carry." "What you carry?" John's brow furrowed. "You mean our husbands were not only soldiers?" Illyra cut in quickly. "They carried codes, secrets of war, weapons hidden across the stars. When they died, that knowledge passed to us, bound by blood and memory. We are living vaults. That is why they hunt us." John felt his blood run cold. The widows had never been random refugees. They were the last holders of a galaxy-shaking secret. And now, the warlords wanted it back. The night stretched on with the enemy camped just beyond the hills. Fires burned in the distance, shadows moving against the glow. The widows gathered, close around John in the barn, their faces filled with exhaustion and fear. "They will not stop," Illyra whispered. "They will burn your ranch, your world, everything, if we do not give them what they seek." John looked at them one by one. He saw the fear, the pain, but also the determination. He remembered the broken oath, the promises of peace shattered. Like glass, "No," he said firmly, "they won't burn my ranch. They won't burn Earth, not while I'm still breathing." The widows watched as John loaded his old rifle again, the same one he had sworn never to use. His weathered hands moved steady and sure, like they remembered every battle, every shot. For years he had lived alone, hiding from the ghosts of war. But now the war had come back to his door, and John was ready. The next dawn, The widows and John stood side by side on the hill, looking down at the enemy camp. The war had returned, and this time it would end on his land. The sun was setting over the ranch, casting long golden shadows across the fields. The air smelled of dust, smoke, and fear. The widows stood together, silent, watching the horizon. They all knew the enemy would come soon. John stood in front of them. His old hat rested low on his head, his rifle slung over his shoulder. His hands were steady, though his heart beat like a drum. He had seen war before, but never like this. This wasn't just his fight, it was theirs. "Listen to me," John said, his voice deep and steady. "Tonight they'll try to break us, but this ranch is more than wood and stone. It's our home, and I won't let anyone take it." The widows nodded. Their alien eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Each one held a weapon John had taught them to use. They were no longer helpless refugees. They were warriors. His family. Suddenly, the ground trembled. The sound of engines roared in the distance. A dark cloud of dust rose on the horizon. Alien war machines, sleek, silver, and deadly, were rolling toward the ranch. John clenched his fists. He could see the glint of their armor, the glow of their weapons. The enemy wasn't here to scare them. They were here to kill. The widows moved into position, just as John had trained them. Some crouched by the barn, others hid behind fences and rocks. John stood at the front gate, rifle in hand, waiting. The war machines stopped 100 yards. Away from them stepped tall alien soldiers in black armor. Their leader was massive, his voice cold and sharp as he shouted across the field. "Old man, give us the widows, and we'll spare your life." John spat on the ground. "Not a chance," the leader growled, raising his hand. "Then you'll die with them." The first wave of soldiers charged. Energy rifles lit up the night sky. Bolts of red fire streaked across the fields. The ranch shook with explosions. John fired back, his shots precise and deadly. Every pull of the trigger dropped an enemy. The widows fought fiercely, their alien blades glowing as they clashed with armored troops. The ranch became a battlefield. The enemy pushed hard, but the defenders pushed harder. One widow leaped into the air, cutting down 2 soldiers with a single strike. Another dragged a wounded sister to safety while still firing her weapon. But the enemy kept coming. For every soldier they cut down, 2 more appeared. The war machines rolled forward, their cannons charging. John's heart sank. He knew they couldn't hold much longer. He looked at the widows, bloodied, tired, but still. Standing and felt a surge of pride. He shouted, "Hold the line! This is our stand." As the first cannon fired, John sprinted forward. He threw himself into the blast, rolling into cover. His rifle barked fire again and again, until the barrel smoked hot. The widows cried out in unison, charging with him. Their voices, alien yet fierce, echoed across the ranch. Together, human and alien fought side by side, as one. The battle raged deep into the night. Flames lit the sky. The ground shook. The screams of dying soldiers filled the air. At last, John reached the enemy leader. Their eyes met, old soldier against ruthless commander. "You should have left them alone," John growled. The alien raised his blade. John raised his rifle. The clash was brutal, sparks flying as blade met steel. The leader was strong, but John's will was stronger. With one final strike, John drove the alien back. The widows, roaring with fury, rushed in. Together, they overwhelmed him. The leader fell, defeated. The battlefield went silent. The remaining soldiers looked around, saw their leader dead, and fled into the night. The war machines retreated, their engines fading into the distance. The widows dropped their weapons. Tears filled their glowing eyes. They turned to John, their savior, their defender. John stood tall, his chest heaving. He looked at the burning ranch behind him, the wreckage scattered across the fields, and then at the widows. "It's over," he whispered. But deep down, he knew it wasn't truly over. Wars never ended that easily. Still, for this night, they had won. The widows gathered around him, silent, grateful. One by one, they bowed their heads. John, the lonely old rancher, had become more than their protector. He had become their family. As the stars glowed above the smoking battlefield, John looked to the heavens and smiled. He wasn't alone anymore, and if war ever came again, the galaxy would remember the final stand.